Also flowering at the end of July is a relatively unusual and little grown tree called a Maackia. And you spell Maackia with two A's and a K. So it's Maackia really, I suppose. And we're now looking at the first of these Maackia trees, and this is Maackia hupehensis. And it's maybe not the most exciting flower that you've ever seen, but I'm afraid the bees and the butterflies wouldn't agree with you. It has upright, sort of creamy white flowers on these rather peculiar stalks, and not all the flowers come out at the same moment. You've got, three flowers there, and one hasn't come out, one's over, and one's just coming. And looking across the top of the tree, quite a few flowers are just coming and some are over. And this Maackia hupehensis has these, very long and quite distinguished leaves with many little leaflets down the side. Once you've seen it, you should be able to recognize it. Unfortunately, we planted this tree initially where it didn't quite get enough light. There was a lot more shade here, and the tree sort of flopped over, growing towards the light, and rather than growing upright as a small tree as it should. But nevertheless, that does at least mean now we can actually get close to the flowers and look at them. And this was a tree which was collected in Western China by Ernest Wilson in 1908. It's never been the biggest seller, but it is a tree which flowers in the middle of summer, and there aren't too many of those. And there's one other species growing here of Maackia which we must go and have a look at, although we won't be able to get so close to the flowers. The other thing about this tree, which is almost better than its slightly dull flowers, is the new growth in the spring is velvety, and you can see a bit of the sort of velvet is still left on the covering, or velvety indumentum on the new growth. But when these leaves first appear in the spring, the new growth is really strong and distinct blue, and that's what distinguishes this hupehensis, this particular species, from the two other different species of Maackia, and I think that's what probably makes it the best one growing here anyway. So I'm afraid we're only able to show you Maackia amurensis, or amurensis rather, in the distance. There are flowers high up. They're starting to go over, and they are much the same colour as in hupehensis, but if we were looking at the flowers close to, we would see a little bluish tinge to the white flowers, but I'm afraid they're rather too high up the tree for us to be able to see very much. You may not have been too impressed with our pictures of the flowers of Maackia amurensis, but at least let us have a look at the wonderful peeling bark that this tree has. And it peels quite slowly and gently and creates a very interesting effect. And only last week in my garden diary I was photographing this tree at about 100 years old, and if you look on the diary you'll be able to see how this bark eventually peels and splits even more and becomes even more interesting. So maybe this is a tree that you grow for the interest of the bark rather than the interest of the flower, because I'm afraid the flowers are a bit too high up. But this is a tree which Caerhays sells quite a few of, for those people who want to try to grow something intriguingly different and more unusual. And it's never going to not take your breath away with the flowers, but it is a tree that gives you something new to look at in the summer.